But I want to thank Mayor Benjamin, who called me. Let's just first deal with the elephant in the room, which is the events of the last 24, 48 hours. Let's just address that. So Mayor Benjamin called me and told me that it was shifting and it was going to change, that he and Dr. Artis had made the decision that it was only right and only a reflection of this most honorable institution that it would be opened to students, this event, that it would not be a paid event, and that everyone would be able to participate. So I want to just publicly thank both the mayor and Dr. Artis for your leadership and for your voice in this. And let me just be clear so you can just hear it from me. I refused to come with the previous sponsorship of this event because, frankly, Benedict students were excluded. And as a proud HBCU graduate, and especially knowing these times and the challenges of these times, I believe that it was so critically important that the students be present, that their voice be heard, and that it be reflected in a forum on this subject and so many others. But in particular, when we are talking to candidates for presidency of the United States, much less the President of the United States. And also, I said I would not come because I just couldn't believe that Donald Trump would be given an award as it relates to criminal justice reform. I mean, let's be clear. This is somebody who has disrespected the voices that have been present for decades about the need for reform of this system, the people who have marched for justice in this system, the people who have sacrificed to create leadership around justice in this system. And so this being an election in 2020 that I believe very much puts justice on the ballot, and this being a forum for people who are running for president, much less the current occupant of the White House, has to reflect then the fight for justice. And the core of any fight for justice is that you speak truth. That you speak truth. Uncomfortable though it may make some. And let's speak truth. When he compares what's happening around the system for justice in the United States of America, because let's be clear, the framers of the Constitution of the United States of America, which has always been what we have relied on when we fought for justice in the courts. Thurgood knew that, Charles Hamilton Houston knew that, Constance Baker Motley knew that. So let's talk about the Constitution of the United States and the framers of that Constitution, who rightly said there may be a moment where we have someone who has abused their authority in our government. So they created this system of democracy with 3 equal, co-equal, independent branches of government. And then said, because they imagined a moment like this, we will build it in a way there will be checks and balances in case there is an abuse of power. And so right now, we are witnessing through the impeachment process those checks and balances kicking in, as rightly they should, for the sake of the integrity of our system of justice and democracy. But what do we have in Donald Trump? Someone who dares to use the word lynching with the blood that has been poured on the soil of South Carolina and so many places. And dares to talk about his victimization. Well, let's compare it to those who have suffered in a criminal justice system in America that has too often been informed by racial bias and by injustice, and he dares to compare himself to the people who have been at the wrong end of a system that is in need of reform. Well, let's just for a moment, I'm going to offer you a couple of examples to make clear why that it is an inappropriate example in comparison. So when we talk about it, let's look. Donald Trump has been accused in the Mueller report of at least 10 incidents of obstruction of justice. Be clear, because the Mueller report is clear. He was not indicted because there is a memo in the United States Department of Justice that's saying a sitting president cannot be indicted. Were it anybody else, that indictment, I am sure, would have gone through. But in these allegations that are before the impeachment proceedings, he has a team of lawyers. By contrast, 80% of the people charged with crime in the United States of America cannot afford a lawyer. Let's talk about the fact that if he were, like so many who have been accused in the criminal justice system, actually accused the way he refers to himself as being a victim of all of this, well, let's be clear that the accused would be in jail. He's sitting in the White House. Let's also be clear that anybody walking into a courtroom who has been charged with a crime in America today does not have the ability to fire the prosecutor. But yet he tried to fire Mueller and fired Comey. So there is no comparison. And this is on the heels, guys, and this is why I just couldn't come. This is on the heels of a history where he was arguing against the Central Park Five, where he put in place an Attorney General of the United States of America when he became president that has doubled the funding of private prisons, that they have, under his administration, essentially stopped all pattern and practice investigations and stopped all that needs to happen around oversight for police departments that have been in need of reform, right? This is what has happened under this leadership, and this is why I decided not to come. But today the students are here, the public is here, and so I thank you. And so I'm here to talk about what I believe justice is and should look like in America and what is on the ballot in 2020 in terms of the challenges before us. And my background on this is that I am a child of parents who met when they were active in the civil rights movement. My perspective on this is that I was born into and raised in a community where the inequities, the unfairness, the injustices of the criminal justice system were not something I read about, not something I watched on TV. It was something I lived and experienced. And so when, after attending Howard University and going back home to law school, I made a very conscious decision to become a prosecutor, knowing that the system was in need of reform, and my perspective is that to reform that system, let's be on the inside also, where the decisions are being made and we have the power to do something about it, in addition to all of those smart and forceful advocates who are on the outside. And so I took on the work of doing it, and when I was elected as District Attorney of San Francisco, created one of the first initiatives in the United States focused on young men who, mostly young men, some young women, who were arrested for drugs and getting them jobs and counseling. People said, what are you doing? This was back in the dark ages on these things. I was elected in 2003. People said, what are you doing? You're supposed to be putting people in jail, not letting them out. People said, why are you giving them jobs? We need jobs. People who haven't committed a crime need jobs. And I said, no, this is a system that in particular, this war on drugs has been a failure. It's a public health crisis. It should not be criminalized, and it has led to America's mass incarceration system. When I was Attorney General of the United States, of California, it's a big state. I actually led the second largest Department of Justice in the United States, second only to the United States Department of Justice. And there we did the work of saying that law enforcement needs to be held accountable for what is racial bias. Everybody carries it, but when you carry a gun, when you have the ability to determine that someone will be deprived of their liberty because they will be arrested, then we need to check that. And so we created one of the first in the nation trainings on racial bias that is mandatory for police officers. When I ran the Department of Justice of California, we required, and I required, that all of the law enforcement agents under my control wear body cameras and keep them on full time. These were the kinds of work that we did, and this is part of my background. Now, talking about the future and as we go forward, I have outlined what I believe is one of the most necessary opportunities that we have to reform America's criminal justice system, and as president, what I fully intend to carry out. It is about ending mass incarceration. It is about responsibility and accountability, not only for police, but for prosecutors. It is about doing what we must do to take the profit out of the criminal justice system, both in terms of money bail, but also shutting down immediately those private prisons. And it is about focusing on women and incarcerated women and families, and understanding that in these moments when we're talking about family separation, the criminal justice system of the United States has also, by its system and design, affected family separation, and we need to put it in check and reform it around that as well. So I thank you all for your leadership, and I'm looking forward now to our conversation. Thank you.